Hello everybody, it's Dan, and I've been asked not only to test out this new camera, but also to talk about my life and what led me up to becoming this games reviewer on Lemon Amiga. Well, that's a long story, and it's going to take a long time for me to do that. So it's going to take maybe a few hours, and I don't know if this is going to be in installments or what. So my life is complicated because I've had lots of different avenues in my life. I've had business adventures, home life, spiritual life, emotional life, everything under the sun. In fact, you could say that I had quite an emotional life most of the time. So, whereas most people haven't been broken into 12 times in 3 months, whereas most people haven't had to put up with all kinds of things, I've actually had to do that. So one of my latest comments on one of my latest videos, not the Lemon Amiga videos, it said, I sound like I'm being tortured. I sound like I'm being, I can't remember the words, but if that seems to come out in my voice, then it's probably because I've had to go through some emotional pain in my life. So I don't really want to stick around on that, but it has been there, and so we'll be mentioning that at points during this, and we'll be going back all the way to 1986, first of all, and I might put some pictures up just to show you what I'm talking about. And so, if you don't know me already, my name's Dan. I'm 45 years old at the moment, having just had a birthday, and I was born February the 27th, 1976, which makes me a Pisces. And so, my early life was a series of surrogate fathers who my mum tried to have some kind of partnership with, and unfortunately I'd never had a real father, and all those surrogate fathers, half of them turned out to be criminals and beat her up and threw glasses against the wall and that kind of thing. So you could say that part of my childhood was kind of being whipped with a belt and where are you going, when are you coming back? Do this, tidy your room, do your homework, get down for your tea, go up for your lunch, do this, get that computer off, get a shower. And that was from as long as living memory. So we'll fast forward to 1986, and I do have a timeline on the other computer so I can see the timeline that I'm actually talking about. And the camera is up there on the top of the screen, so if I don't look at the camera too often, it's because I'm looking at myself on the screen. So we're going back to 1986, ladies and gentlemen. I was age 10, and it was my 4th year of primary school, and I had 2 friends. One of them was called Paul, and the other one was called Ian. Both lived on the same row as I did, the same block. So I went up to see Paul one day, and he had one of these, I don't know what it is, but I'll probably put a picture on the screen. I think it was a Tomy handheld thing. You put it against your face like that. It was shaped like a spaceship, and you could fly around literally with it like a spaceship. It had 2 ocular lenses that'll let you see this game. And it was a mechanical game that used batteries. And you pressed the button, and it was a car racing game, and you basically moved to one side of the screen or another to avoid cars, and as you held the battery down, it would go faster and faster until the battery ran out, and it would go slower and slower and slower until it eventually stopped. And you had to hold the thing up to the sunlight so you could see the thing. You couldn't play the game in the dark. So that was one of them. And then he got himself an Atari 800 XL. And that was probably, in 1986, my first encounter with a computer. And computers back in those days, I didn't own a calculator. I was still in my 4th year of junior school. So I didn't have any of that stuff. I was pretty naive. I kept myself to myself. And so one day Paul got this computer and his mum and dad, well, I remember playing Cops and Robbers on there, the SR800 XL, and Mrs. Pac-Man. And one day they got loads of cartridges for the thing, and it just loaded up just like that. They stuck the cartridges in and it went brrr, and it was straight up there. Whereas when the tape loading, it was half of the time it crashed and you had to rewind the tape. Syntax error, unable to whatever, and you had to rewind the tape, try it again. That was my first encounter with a computer. As far as I know, it had the old crappy Atari joysticks on there. In fact, I'm pretty sure it did. So, by the way, if you're wondering why I'm wearing a white t-shirt, it's the Lemon Amiga t-shirt that I printed off. So that's why I'm sat here wearing a white t-shirt. Not that you can see it on the screen. So I'm there with an Atari 800 XL playing that on my mate's computer. We lived just up the road, and around that time I was going out with the dog every day from 10 a.m. till 10 p.m, exploring, having adventures, going into places I shouldn't, lighting fires, you know, going around. Well, I used to live next to a brickyard, so the brickyard used to go all the way back, Accrington Norrie brickyard, and then there was another one, and then there was another one after that. And then there was a hill, and then there was the quarry where they dig out all of the Norrie bricks. And so I could go wandering off for hours with the dog, down into woodlands, down by the canal, over to the next village, over into the next town. And I was never in the house. And one day, 1986, my mum was seeing a partner called Frank, and Walter, which was her previous partner, took me to a caravan site, trailer park, whatever you want to call it, which is near the village of Waddington, which is near Clitheroe, and I'm named Waddington, Daniel Waddington, so obviously it stuck by me. If you go down by Heddersford Bridge, you go over the bridge, yeah, you hang a right, you go around the country lanes for a bit, and then it's virtually the first left off there before you get to Waddington. I think it's the Sun Inn or something like that, but it's before you get there. And there was a campsite, and there was a clubhouse, and it had restrooms and chairs that you could sit in front of, massive glass windows. And in the back of this place, there were some arcades, and I was frightened to death of these arcades, obviously. I didn't even know they existed. I didn't know what an arcade was. And so these guys took me into the back, and we had a look around. And there were all these freestanding cabinets there with all these different games on, virtually none of which I can remember. And they said, I can clearly remember it, here's 50 pence. 50 pence. So it's like, 50 Deutschmarks, 50 guilders, Geld. It's pretty measly. And at that time, that instant time, I realised that I could afford, with this 50p, to play either 5 goals of a really crappy game or 1 goal of a really amazing game. This was 1986, so I don't remember what the really amazing games were. I took one look at them and realised that they were going to be too hard for me to play them. So I found a driving game, and that was called Rally X. And the other 2 guys had gone back into the clubhouse by now. I put the money in. Bang. First go, Rally X. And before I get to that, let's just explain what this arcade looked like. You walked in, and there was a booth over to your left where you got small change. You got all your notes changed into coins. And then on this hand side, on the right as you walked in, there was a row of black and white arcade machines, all with black and white screens. And then on the back wall, there was a row of pinball machines, which again I'd never even seen. And then as you walked around the corner on the opposite side of the booth, there was a few colour machines, and they were 50p. There were a few 25p, and all the ones that I was looking at were 10p. Now, back in those days, colour TVs cost a fortune, and what somebody had done is they've ordered a load of arcade machines for this arcade, ripped out all the colour TVs, swapped them with black and white TVs, flogged off all the colour TVs, made a profit, and so I was playing in an arcade full of black and white TVs, thinking that that is the way it was meant to be, and the entire arcade was black and white. So I found a game, Rally X, it was black and white, chuck the 50p and bang, first go. It was on a driving wheel. This thing had real driving pedals and a real driving wheel. So I was driving around like that, aged 10 years old. I wasn't very tall. And so I was having to look up at the screen, and it was really heavy. So I was like that. Crashed. I didn't have a clue what I was meant to do, not even the slightest. Second go, I managed to get away from the guys for a little bit and get ahead, and I was going around a maze. What's going on? No idea. Died. Third go, bang. This time I managed to escape from the other drivers. I went around a bit and I managed to press a button. Bang, what does that button do? Oh, smoke screen. Well, I have no idea. Yeah, look, there's a flag. Let's get that flag. Ding, it made a noise. That must mean I'm meant to collect the flags. Look around, there's a map in the corner of the screen. Wow, there's a flag down there. It must mean that I'm meant to collect these things on the map, or wherever the map was on that screen. So, fourth go, bang, trying to escape from the guys, avoiding the things, going around, getting the flags. I'm beginning to get it, but my arms are getting tired. Looking up at this screen like this, everything's getting tired. Foot on the brake pedal, only just managed to get the accelerator. I can't quite reach the brake pedal. I'm going around. And the goal lasted quite a bit, and I'm thinking, well, I might be getting the hang of this. And then I put the last 10p in, with a virtual 10p in, at the last game, started it up, got the first flag, boom, straight into an enemy, game over. The whole experience lasted about 5 minutes, probably as long as it took to explain it. And I went back to the other guys, sat in the restroom, sat in front of the big bay windows, looking out at the caravan site. And they said, what happened? I said, I died. And this Walter guy said, fancy that, you're here, you're still alive, and yet you died. And I didn't get what he was. It's like, ha ha, is that meant to be a joke? Ha ha. But it was philosophy, wasn't it? I'm still here, I died, and yes, it's philosophy. It's one of the gags of the scene, isn't it? You lose your life, you get killed, you die, over and over and over and over and over and over again. Day after day after day after day. And then what happens? You have another go. You get an extra life, you get extra credits, bang, you have another go. So that was my first experience of philosophy, and it was also my first experience of the arcade games back in those days. So we're still in 1986, I'm still age 10, and this Frank gives me a load of Your Commodore magazines in a plastic bag. There must have been 10 of them, plus a few others, Commodore users. And I didn't know what a Commodore 64 was back in 1986. I hadn't seen a computer apart from my mate's Atari 800 XL, the one with a metal strip down one side. And then, so I got these Commodore magazines, and I put a piece of paper under the front cover, and I actually traced the cover of Your Commodore in the corner of it, with Your Commodore at the top. And then I traced the cover with the machine and the blurb. Commodore 64, the best thing ever. You see, at age 10, I could barely read. I could barely write. But what I did, I constructed maybe a 10-page magazine from this one, or from them, from the cover, that I created with felt tips, some crayons and pens. I drew my own Commodore 64, I wrote my own articles. Commodore 64, isn't it? The greatest machine in the world. It's got amazing graphics. super sound, superb playability, amazing, cheap price, it's the, you know, whatever, and this went on for 10 pages. The game's fantastic, immense playability. And I'd hardly read any of the magazines. I was basically making it all up out of my head, my imagination of what these games could have been had I experienced a Commodore 64, which I hadn't at that point. And I wasn't able to read many of the magazines. It took me forever, you know, Commodore 64 graphics are very good, you know, it took forever. So I made a magazine before I even knew what a magazine really was, about the Commodore 64, which was carbon copy. And so that began my writing, I won't say career because I never had a career, but my writing aspect. So we've got through the philosophy, the games and the writing already. So that's 1 year done, terrific. I've counted up 125 of these points and we've got through the first 5. Terrific. So let's move on. 1987. 1987. I'm age 11. It's my 5th year, my final year at junior school. I'm already that big. I'm very small. So, age 11. And a friend of Frank's, which was a friend of my mum's, we got introduced to this guy and his partner, Sheila, and he'd just got himself a VIC-20. Voodoo Magic, 3.5 kilobytes of RAM. That is ultra, that is unbelievable. So he just got this VIC-20. And I got to play on that while the others were in the other room chatting. And so every time we went to see Sheila and Dave with Frank, who was a friend of a friend, I got to play on the VIC-20. And I can't remember many or any of the games, probably Gorf, definitely Gorf. I really can't remember many of the games that I used to play. Oh, and back in the day, by the way, at this point in my life, I was talking Broad Lancashire. And if you don't know what Broad Lancashire is, maybe if you go back 80 years, you would not recognise the dialect of your own county, never mind your own country. So my granddad used to say, "I young mum from Narrated City, I cross road and tit shop and buy tit paper and go to row feed farm to go over at fields." And you've no idea what they were talking about because it was all slang, and Lancashire slang was different to Yorkshire slang, and that was different to everywhere else, so nobody could understand each other. And I spoke like that, and I was putting chicken in the oven and turning up to gas mark 5 and waiting for half an hour and then going checking chicken and coming back, putting it on slate table and putting it out, putting dishes out. And I can barely speak like that anymore. I've forgotten how to even speak like that, but I used to speak like that heavily back in the day, very broad, 100%, and I still say I to this day. I. So if ever anybody says anything, instead of saying yes, I'll say I. And that's another thing. If you think about it, the Scottish say I, the Cumbrians say I, the Lancashire people say I, the Yorkshire people say I, the people from Newcastle say I, the people from North Wales say I, the people from North Ireland say I, and the people from the West Country, Devon and Cornwall, they're like pirates, aren't they? So R. Instead of I, they say R, R, which is virtually I. So really, there's only the Midlands and home counties which actually say I in Britain, so they're actually the minority, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, and even in London, in the Houses of Parliament, when they want something passing through, they say, people who want this passed say aye, and they all go aye. They say the ayes have it. So even Parliament say aye. Even in London they say aye. Oh aye. So the ayes have it. So anyway, age 11, I was playing on this VIC-20 and Frank got himself a Grandstand. Now Grandstand was a Pong clone that came out in Europe, as far as I know, it had those paddle controls. If you call them a paddle, you turn them. You turn them a bit like what do you call it? A Magnavox, was it? You turn these things, and obviously it's Pong. Beep, boop, beep, boop. And we got that thing out for maybe an hour one day. And Frank had to go against my mum. And my mum had to go against me. And I had to go against Frank. And then it was a playoff. Basically, I beat everybody under the table. And ever since that day, whenever anybody said, do you want to get the Grandstand Pong game out? Everybody would always say no, because you always beat us. You always beat us all. You're too good at it. So that Pong game, that Grandstand, never came out again. So that was that. And so age 11, I'm going down to the swimming baths with my mate Paul. And in the swimming baths, they've got arcades. And in the arcade, they had a colour arcade machine called Up and Down. You remember Up and Down? It's the car thing. Seen it on the Commodore 64. So I played, well, I didn't play that, but I saw it in the arcades, and I think they also had Pac-Mania. Not quite sure, they kept changing, but Spy Hunter as well, maybe, definitely Up and Down. So I didn't get to play that because I was broke and I didn't get virtually any pocket money at any stage of my early career, so obviously I didn't bother doing that, but I could afford to go into the sports centre and swim in the swimming baths all day. So I went there every Saturday and I'd dive down, I learned to hold my breath, and I went to the sports centre and in the swim baths every time I could do it. In fact, I was never in because I couldn't stand being in. What have you been? Where are you going? What have you up to? Get your homework done. Get to bed. Get up again. So that was age 11. We've now got through 8 of the 125 points. Let's move on. I'm going to get a pretty hoarse voice doing this eventually. And obviously, when I'm doing these reviews, these guides, these things, I put on a bit of a voice. It's obviously not me, normal voice. Because if I'm talking normally, it sounds a bit bland, it sounds a bit boring, and I don't really have a very happy or very interesting normal voice. It just sounds to be very monotone and very, very ordinary. So I don't tend to use it very much when I'm doing these talks for obvious reasons, because it's boring. And like I say, I released a video the other day, a history of giant monster movies. Last time I looked at it, it had 1,000 views. This time, 22,000 views I looked at it. And half of the comments said they thought I'd had a stroke. What's wrong with your voice? It sounds like you're in panic. What's going on? This would be alright if it wasn't for the voice. The narration sucks. So I'm beginning to think that even the zany voice isn't actually that good at all, and it's not actually that fun for most people. It's a mixed bag. If I feel like I'm being hurt, I was. So let's move on past that. 1988, ladies and gentlemen, I was age 12. Now this Dave and Sheila and Dave, it was first year of high school, and Dave got himself a Commodore 64. Upgraded. So every time we went around to see Sheila and Dave, I got to play on the Commodore 64. And in those days, they didn't have much. I remember he had international soccer on cartridge and loads of copied games on cartridge. And I can't remember that many, if any, to be honest. They just seem to be copied game. He had Yeehaw Kung Fu and Yeehaw Kung Fu 2 and games like that. Park Patrol, I definitely remember on the C64 playing that at his house before I even knew what a computer really was. Loaded it up and he didn't even know. I figured it out. Bam, he just pressed the 2 buttons, bam, it came up load, he put the tape in, bam, he pressed it and it loaded. So that was the C64. And then I went on holiday in 1988. Again, a massive long story, so I'm going to cover it, or at least in part. And because it's interesting, because I got myself my first ever, not computer, not console, but handheld video game. Ooh. The handheld video game in those days comprised of a Nintendo Game & Watch, which were released in the early 80s and late 70s by Nintendo, and they eventually got over to the UK, and I got one, and I was given one in 1988 when I was 12 years old. That was my first thing, and it was it came with Game & Watch. What was it? It was called Manhole. It came with a blue backplate, kind of shiny metal, and it had 4 buttons on it, 5, 6 if you include the options. You could basically go to the top left corner, the top right corner, bottom left corner, and the bottom right corner, and you had to basically tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick. And as the man went along, he walked along, and as he got to a gap, you had to put the platform underneath him, so the man walked across, tick tock, tick tock, like that, and there were 2 gaps, one in the middle, one over there, and you had to get them across. So that went up to amazing speeds, like tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. So we went on our first holiday ever, and it was to Spain. Spain, fabulous Spain. Surprising, many Spaniards come over to this country for the work, and then when they get here, they realise it's a bit damp. And let me just explain about Lancashire weather. Just to veer away from my Spain story, Lancashire weather was the cotton region for a reason, because it's always raining, it's always damp. If you look at a humidity chart, if it's not very humid, if it's dry, well, if it's ultra humid, it's very, very, very dry, and that's right at the bottom, ultra humid. And then as the damper it goes more and more up the scale until you get to wet. And of course, once it gets to 100% non-humid, it's completely wet. So if you have, for example, 80% humidity, it means it's damp. In Lancashire, we have 90% humidity all of the year round. It rains every day, and if it's not raining, it will do. It's overcast every day at some point. And Accrington, in Blackburn, they get warm weather in the summer and the humidity goes down to 75%. In Burnley, they get it in the summer, and in the spring it dries out and it goes down to 75%. Whatever it is, in Accrington, it never drops below 90% all the time. And Accrington is actually the 4th wettest, the 4th dampest, should I say, not the wettest, not the wettest. It's the 4th dampest town in the Northern Hemisphere. There's a place in Sweden which is damper. And there's a few places up and down which is damper. But it's the 4th dampest. It's not the wettest, because the rainfall isn't that heavy, but it's just constant. So if the rain falls constant every day, it's damp every day, and it's literally running down the walls. And it's cold and it's freezing, and we get one mild day in the summer, one mild week, or 2 weeks if we're lucky, one hot day if you're lucky, and that's it. And we're born with that, and we have to get used to it. If you live in Liverpool, 70% humidity, no problem. Leeds, 65. They've got it dry over there. Newcastle's on the coast. Blackpool, it's windy. Windy. Here, the only time it's windy is when it's raining. So anyway, that was the gloomy, doomy, dark, satanic north that I grew up in, full of brick factories and weaving sheds and God knows what else. So anyway, back to sunny Spain. 1988, we got this machine. I got it, the family played it. We went to a hotel called Las Chapas, which is not there anymore, but the region of Las Chapas is near Marbella, which is near Fuengirola, which is near Torremolinos, which is near Malaga. And you've got Portaventura, is that? I can't remember. I used to know it all. But anyway, if you go past all that stuff, past Marbella, you eventually get to Gibraltar. And we went to Gibraltar for a one-day trip, and while we were there, they were filming the James Bond film, The Living Daylights, with Timothy Dalton. We went round the back of the island, and round the bottom of the gigantic rock, there was a jeep with dummies in there. And the tour guide said every day they take the jeep to the top of the mountain, and twice a day they chuck it off, and they film it while they chucked it off, and they film it all the way down, and watch all the dummies falling out, and then, like I say, twice a day they take it up again. Today they're not filming, it's the day off. It's like, right, we got off the coach and we started going up the hill, up towards St Michael's Caves, and the whole place is buried off because of the James Bond film. The whole place was thick, alive, buzzing with the James Bond film. You could cut the atmosphere with it. We went into St Michael's Caves. There was nothing filming, but you could feel it. There were barriers on the road saying 007 filming here, soundstage, get off. So wonderful. And it had that massive vibe about it, and that's why I love that movie. It's not the greatest Bond film ever, but the fact that I was there whilst they were filming it in Gibraltar, and if I'd turned up a day later, I could have actually seen it. But anyway, so it was our first holiday in Spain. It was a dive. The hotel got eaten by ants whilst we were there. On the second day that we were there, the Crazy Golf Course had 9 holes. By the 12th day that we were there, the ants had eaten it away, and the Crazy Golf Course only had 2 playable holes left. The rest was in ruin. The hotel fell into ruin whilst we were living there by the day. It was the cheapest hotel available. It was the cheapest square deal because we couldn't afford it. So that was my first holiday, and that was my first machine. It wasn't a box. It was just a big kind of thing. So, still age 12, still 1988, we come home from the holiday, and I'm still playing on Dave's Commodore 64. Now, Dave and Sheila, I lived in Clayton Moors. I don't live there anymore, and now live in Accrington. Clayton Moors, Dave lived in Great Harwood, which was about 2.5 miles away from where I used to live. So it was on top of, going up a valley. So you had to go down the valley from Clane all the way down to Hyndburn River, and then all the way back up the valley on the other side, which was really steep. I don't know what it was, but I'm really, really steep on the other side. And then going back, really steep going downhill, but then all the way up the valley again, all the way up to the other side. And I used to go on Sunday between 9 and 10 a.m. and, really naive at that stage in my life. I used to bang on his door, bum, 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 bum. Hello, it's Daniel. Can I play on your computer? And the guy would open up the door and let me in, and I'd stay all day. My mum would be on the phone. Where is he? I've been looking everywhere for him. He's here. He's playing on a computer. He's all right. We'll phone you when he's coming home. Right. So I was there. I invited myself, and that's been a habit of mine throughout my life. If it's something that I want to be into, I'll get behind the scenes. I'll invite myself in, and I'll just take over. And if somebody says you can't do that, it's, oh, sorry. So I was inviting myself over week after week until what we called the Dave incident. One Sunday I went over. It was so quiet that even the birds hadn't got out of bed. So quiet that you could hear my own breath. Nothing was stirring, not even a mouse, except for bum, 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 bum. Come on, Roy, I want to play on your computer. I want to play on your computer. It wasn't long after that they started to nag my parents. You've got to get him a Commodore 64. We can't be doing any of this any longer. You've got to get him a computer. So reluctantly, my mum, that Christmas 1988, I got a first Commodore 64. She didn't want to buy it. but she bought it and it came with a load of copied games and a load of originals in boxes. In fact, it didn't come with that many copied games. If I remember rightly, it came with mostly originals and then boxes and boxes and boxes of originals. So all the ones that I bought after that were budget games. So I finally first got my, what I call a 60, a 64, not to be confused with an N64. I got my 60, Christmas 1988. It came with a 14-inch black and white telly, which I got set up with a computer on the dining room table, wooden, fake wood dining room table that had those slat things that they lifted up. So the dining room was lifted up and it had my telly on there, 14-inch, and I got to play games like Bounty Bob Strikes Back in black and white, and all the other games that I had in black and white. And I can only remember certain games, to be honest. I can't actually remember that many, which is rather crap. I can't remember hardly any, but I can remember all of the ones that I owned. It's just that I can't remember all the ones that I got with the computer. So the 64 later on, Hawkeye, favourite games, Last Ninja 2, which I first played at Dave's place, which came with the star, the ninja star and the mask and the instructions, and the Last Ninja 2 was just the greatest game that I've ever played on the Commodore 64, and it ranks up there as one of my top games of all time. But I'm not sure I got to play Whiz Ball. Definitely played Pit Stop 2 at Dave's place. Things like that. So they were pretty similar games that I got. I don't think I played Rastan very often. Not Rastan, what do I think about? That was a really crappy game. Rygar. I didn't play that very often. And I got mostly crappy games with it. But over the years I built them up. And I got loads and loads of box sets over the years. Like the Hollywood pack, game set and match 2 pack, the hit pack, elite hit pack, that kind of thing, the hit squad, whatever. I got quite a lot of them. So that's 1988. And before my voice goes completely, we're going to move on now to 1989. I've got my first computer. It's mine. And I'm playing it on the dining room table next to the dartboard. So, for my birthday, 1989. I'm now 13 years old. It's now my second year at high school. And it's when I started to be bullied. Wonderful. This guy used to come up to me, bam, every single day in the stomach. And if that doesn't harden you up after months of that kind of abuse, you certainly get hard to it after a bit. In the meantime, I used to hide away with my friends, and my high school friends were Simon, Lee, another Lee spelled a different way, and Kevin. So I used to hang around with our squad, the reject squad. So Simon already had a Commodore 64, but his second year of high school had a C64. Lee had an Amstrad CPC 464, which I never got to see, I never played it, and his dad had an IBM PC. In 89, it was probably 286 or something like that. And so what else happened? In 1989, I was learning Commodore 64 games with Simon, because if you remember, I started off inviting myself to the sports centre every Saturday, going down there staying all day, and then I invited myself to Dave's place every Saturday, going over there staying all day, walking 2 miles each way, both ways to both places. And then by this time I was going down to Simon's house, which was another 2.5 miles either way. Downhill this time all the way, but uphill coming all the way back. So I spent all day there. Saturday I couldn't be doing with staying in the house. So Simon showed me a game, and it was Dizzy 1. Dizzy 1. I can't remember the music off the top of my head, but it was Dizzy 1 on the Commodore 64. And Dizzy 1 was an amazing game. By the way, if you can see my background flashing on and off, I'm not too worried about that. It's just that the background's full of, well, a washing machine, a red dustbin, a load of washing up, and the sink. And a sofa with a lot of things thrown on it. So if you ever see the background flashing on the background and pause it, don't bother. There's nothing in there. So anyway, I'm playing on Simon's computer. He's showed me Dizzy 1. And what else has he got? Ghosts and Goblins. And I'd got my first Commodore 64, so I didn't buy Dizzy 1 at that time, but as soon as it came out, I bought Dizzy 2. I think it was only $1.99 or $2.99. Virtually the day it came out, after he showed me. Because, I mean, Dizzy 1, you play it for the first time, you jump around, the birds kill you, you die. Zzz, bang, you're dead. You don't know what you're doing. You get into the mines, the spiders kill you, vampire bats kill you. And he said, well, look, if you just collect this bird seed, you can do that. If you just collect the insecticide, you can do that. If you get the hard hat, you can do that. And it completely unlocked the game. Got rid of all the monsters, and then it was just a platformer, and then it was just a puzzler from A to B. And that really unlocked it, so I bought Dizzy 2 immediately, before he did, before he could do, just so that I could play it, and it wasn't as fast. And it really wasn't as good, but it still had the Dizzy feel to it, and it's still, you know, it's still good. So I was a big fan of the Dizzies, and I could, if I wanted to, bring up a whole list of the Commodore 64 games I eventually had, and maybe I will do at that point, at some point. But I had quite a few, and so I got my first few games. In those games you could get 4 for a tenner. $10, 10 quid. 4, easy. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Sometimes you could even get 5 games for a tenner. Which, when you saw that Christmas and birthday money, that's, you know, what I got. You know, that was a long time, and then I think I got £1 a week spending money. A week. When I got £1 a day food money for secondary school. So what did I do? I starved myself to death, saved that £1 dinner money, and spent that on video games to cheer myself up. And if I saved up all week, I could afford every weekend to go down to the computer game shop. Now, I can't leave this section without describing my local computer game shop. It's in Accrington. It was called PV Tubes. All right, PV Tubes, because it used to be a TV shop, a TV repair shop, I think. So it's called PV Tubes. Tube as in cathode ray tube. Anyway, they got rid of all the TVs, and now it's selling computers. Video games. And they weren't computers, they were hobby computers. It was in Accrington. It was built into the old gatehouse, as far as I know, the Accrington gatehouse. So it had a tower, what looked like a round tower thing built onto the side of it. And it was up near the colleges and all that kind of thing. It was on the other side of town. Anyway, you walked in, and in front of you, on the right-hand side, immediately on the right, I think you had PC games in a rack, which was against the wall. And then across from those, you had the ZX Spectrum cassettes and the Amstrad CPC cassettes on that rack facing you as you walked in. But then there was also a back to that rack, which had the Commodore 64 games on there. And then behind that, on the back wall, as you walked in to the right, there was all the Amiga games. If you turn to the left, then that was where the demonstration side of the room was, and they had I don't think they had any Segas. They had an Amstrad, a Commodore 64, at least one Amiga. I think they had at least two, and perhaps a BBC or something like that. We could literally put your game in, play it for 10 minutes. I like it, I don't like it, without having to buy it. You could just rent it. You just got the thing. You didn't pay any money. You just put it in, try before you buy. If it was any good, you bought it. If you didn't try it, then you'd spent all day trying them. There was obviously a huge queue of kids waiting to try all these games. So anyway, on the right, if you kept on going to the right, there was a desk which stretched along the right wall all the way through, where they kept two checkouts, and the guys there to help. And then also, as you walked in, straight in front of you, on the back wall, almost on the same back wall as the Amiga stuff, you know, on the same bit, before you turn right to go to the play area, there was also a rack of Dragon 32 games, which had about 14 games on there, and I don't think they ever sold any during the time that I ever went there. And on the top shelf on the Amiga side, I think they had some more PC games and some big box games, but the Amiga side was huge. The C64 racks was fairly huge. We're talking about maybe 2 meters wide and at least 1.5 meters tall rack full of games, the budget games along the bottom and the packs on the top. So it was a paradise. That was called PV Tubes, but we called it TV Pubes because it sounded funnier. TV Pubes. And then it changed its name to PV Computers, but we still called it TV Pubes. So that's where we went, TV Pubes, every Saturday. And I also went there after school as well. Started going down there after school just to mess about, hang around with my mates to save me going home. So at that time, I started getting a magazine with my dinner money. And because I wasn't eating first thing in the morning before I went to school, and because I wasn't eating at dinner, the first meal I had was about 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening. That's after I'd been into town and playing on the video games all day. So that's probably why I'm Mr. Universe now. So that was the computer shop, and I got myself Zap 64 magazine, and it had been going ages in 1989, but I hadn't really heard about it. I didn't want to buy your Commodore because it didn't look very good, and Zap, it had comics in there and comic people doing this and that, and it just looked fun. It just looked exciting with the sketches and the artwork and the reviews and the thumbs up and, you know, the Zap Sizzler and all this lot. And it just looked enticing. It just looked appealing. And like I say, it was only, what was it, £1 in those days? It wasn't that much. So every week I could afford it. So I got it every week. There was a Zap cover tape on the front of it. And I remember Fox Fights Back was on the cover tape. On one of them with, I think, on, I don't know if you got a demo of I'm Super Off-Road, but that was what was on the cover of the magazine. And I know that for a fact because I've still got the magazine on my shelf. Not that you can see it there. Oh yeah, look, Iron Man. Can you see it? Iron Man. That's the Zap 64 edition with that cover tape on it. Still got it. So that was one of my earlier ones. You can also see Commodore 64, that was a later Zap. That's CU Amiga, that's CU Amiga, that's Ace Magazine. That's Commodore User with the J Minor interview in there. And I got that pretty recently. That's my Lotus S3 Turbo Challenge mug that I got. And I realise my finger keeps disappearing. That's my From Bedrooms beer mat. That's my very last modem, a 56.6K modem, and I had 28.8 and all that lot before then. We'll get to that. That's my Dizzy badge from Fantasy World Dizzy. And then we get to the From Bedrooms, Amiga Years, PlayStation Revolution, Amiga Power, the album, and Computer History Museum, computers, top trumps cards. That's my manual from Techno Sound 2 Turbo sound sampler for the Amiga. So anyway, that's the shelf. I've got a couple more magazines down there. Not that many. So there's very, very little that I did keep from my Amiga. Very, very little indeed. Let's just see if I can find anything in here. And I thought, well, I can't really lay my hands on much that there is. If this thing will work. Let's hold it up to the camera. You know exactly what that is. That's the side unit from the Amiga 500 I've still got. And, of course, I'm actually using an Amiga 500 computer, if that thing will work. No idea. But that's what I use as my main keyboard. So, anyway, where was I on the story? So I was buying Zap magazine, that one over there, and I started stealing cover tapes off the front cover of magazines in a British news agent called W.S. Smith's, which changed back and forth between John Menzies. So I was putting my finger underneath the sellotape of the cassette box on the front cover of the magazine, holding it up like that, one hand underneath, slip the thumb under the cassette box, open it up, get the tape out, shut the box, close the magazine, put it back on the shelf, get the tape, go on with it, play the game. So if you ever wondered who was it that kept nicking them in your place, well, it was probably me. Or if you lived in Accrington, it was me anyway. Because I started stealing because I felt unappreciated, and I stole things at primary school and got into trouble, and I was beginning to become a bit of a rebel because I didn't have any affection at home, and so I was spending all my time outside or in the bedroom. So I got myself zapped, and what happened was, for Christmas 1998, I got myself a portable cassette deck, which was a stereo kind of thing, which one used to call a boombox or a ghetto blaster. It was bigger than that. It was a personal stereo. It had 2 slots on it for cassettes. It had a radio tuner on it, and it had 3 speakers, a woofer in the middle, and, 2 side things. I don't even think it had any tweeters on it, but it had the subwoofer in the middle. And it had, it was a Sony, and it had kind of a lever, normal dubbing or high-speed dubbing. And so, just before you go, I might not remember to tell you this later, but Kevin from school, the year later in 1990, came up to me and said, "You do realise if you copy C64 games from tape to tape and use the high-speed dubbing, it actually saves a few seconds off the loading." So I tried it. Original cassette, turned it over, and recorded it on the other side of another cassette with high-speed dubbing, and then I turned the first cassette, over again or whatever, and I recorded that onto the back of that, high-speed dubbing, first onto the second one onto the first, high-speed dubbing, and you could get the loading time down by maybe 30 seconds or so. Just keep doing that, high-speed dubbing. And the Commodore 64 tape drive was very fickle when it came to that kind of thing, but for some reason it worked. No idea why. And my mate Paul, yeah, the same Paul with the Atari 800, he'd got himself a Commodore 64 and he'd got himself a freeze frame cartridge. Now we're cooking on gas. Freeze frame 2 it was. Plugged it in, pressed a button, bam. It said, do you want to freeze frame this game? Whatever it says. Please insert your tape. Press play and record at the same time. And what it did was just like, exactly like a save state on a modern emulator. It took a snapshot of that game in memory from whatever point it was, and it saved that snapshot onto tape or a disc. And I didn't have any disc drive, so I saved it onto tape. And a freeze frame in those days was a miraculous device. Not only did it shave about 40 seconds off the loading time of games, considering games took about between 2 and 5 minutes to load, it really did speed things up. Also, some games were very fickly in those days. Remember the old C2N? You used to use a screwdriver, and you used to turn a screwdriver and the little screw that used to be in there, turn the screw, and for certain games it had to be over here, for certain games it had to be over there, old games, new games, whatever. I had a backup C2N for loading different games and a normal C2N for loading normal games, and it was a nightmare. But if you freeze framed it, it was guaranteed to load on any of the C2Ns that I had, and quicker. So once he lent me that, he never got it back again. I basically freeze framed every single one of my games onto the reverse side of the tape so that I didn't have to wait 5 minutes. I could do it in 2 minutes 30 or whatever it was. And you didn't get a loading screen, but apart from that, it would find FF, freeze frame. It would find it and it would load it. So that's what I did in my 64 years, which is the start of what we're going through at the moment, and we'll continue with the C64 years next time. That's the end of 1990, and next time we're on 1991. And how long before I get my Amiga? Well, not very long, because it's another year and then I get my Amiga. I had C64 for 3 years. Well, I got it Christmas 88. So I had it all through 89, I had it all the way through 1990, when I was stealing the cover tapes, and then in 1991, Christmas 91, that was the 3rd year, and that's when I got my Amiga. So we'll get to the Amiga next time, ladies and gentlemen. We're up there, we're in the bedroom now, we've got a Commodore 64, I don't think I had any cartridges for it apart from the freeze frame, which he eventually did get back. He did eventually get it back. I didn't want to be tight all my life. I did give it to him back, and from that point on, friends were stealing games from me and copying games from me, and we copied games like mad and we swapped them around the schoolyard. So that's my introduction to me, and if you want to see another part, stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for the next part, and I'll see you for that sometime soon. Thank you.